National Grid have issued a stark warning that households could lose power for up to 3 hours at a time if the energy crisis escalated. You probably don't remember it in the 70s, do you?
I'm too young.
You're way too young.
However, you would have been front and centre.
I remember it really vividly, really vividly.
You were in your teens, 20s?
I was... Darcy was born. No, I remember sitting around and we all went into the kitchen in my mum's home. We didn't go to the sitting room. And we had a battery-powered radio. And it's when I started really enjoying news, actually, because they'd have, like, you know, Radio 4 or something on. There'd be a story in the evening. Sat around with candles. And, of course, because I was, despite what you say, really little, it was quite cosy and lovely.
Yeah.
For my parents, incredibly stressful.
Very different proposition.
Very, very stressful,
yeah. The company which oversees energy supplies to England, Scotland and Wales have said this is a worst-case scenario, but it is on the table. Let's speak to our chief correspondent, Richard Gaisford, who's at Shoreham Power Station for us this morning. So, Richard, as Kate was just saying, sort of she reminisces as a child in the 70s experiencing energy rationing like this. Is it likely to happen now?
Well, everyone you speak to involved with this says it is extremely unlikely, Ben, but there are a couple of real causes for concern that are creating these headlines. The first, that the National Grid should talk about this in the first place, knowing the hysteria that would then follow. The second, that Liz Truss, the Prime Minister, who during her leadership campaign absolutely ruled out energy rationing, is now rolling back on that. And we saw that in Prague yesterday, where she was meeting with other European leaders, including President Macron, talking about this energy crisis. Britain's big problem, of course, is that it has an insubstantial amount of gas storage. It's been cut back and not looked after over the years, and that means that there may well not be enough gas for power stations like this that generates electricity, in this case, for up to 430,000 homes along the south coast here. One of the other things that we don't have in the UK at the moment is an education campaign. Other European countries do, telling people how to use electricity more wisely, how to cut back on your energy usage. It has been reported this morning that Jacob Rees-Mogg, the business secretary, had a plan for that up his sleeve, but has been stepped on by Liz Truss because, in the words of the Times, it doesn't suit her ideology.
Plunged into darkness, the reality millions of us could face this winter in the National Grid's worst-case scenario. It would see planned power cuts for up to 3 hours if Europe's energy crisis worsens and gas supplies run low, mainly as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Lib Dems are calling for Liz Truss to call an emergency Cobra meeting, but the Prime Minister, who met with EU leaders in Prague just yesterday, insists the UK's energy supplies are sufficient.
We do have a good supply of energy in the UK. We're in a much better position than many other countries, but of course there's always more we can do, and that's why I'm here working with our partners, making sure we do have a secure energy supply into the future.
In a bid to prevent outages, customers with smart meters will be encouraged to change their usage habits by being offered money back if they use less energy during peak times.
It wouldn't be very good because we wouldn't be able to make the dinners, would we? So that wouldn't be very good.
And also I love playing my Xbox.
I think it's not a nice prospect. I think it would take us out of our normal routine. But I think it's raising the awareness of energy consumption and the concerns we've got overall with energy within the country.
Some are already taking drastic measures to cope with the rising costs. This pub in Cornwall turns off the lights one night a week.
It came from our electricity bill that was quite a shock, and a local that just said, turn the lights out, don't have lights, go the way it used to be.
So whilst businesses and households have started to cut down on power, if the worst happens, they might need to consider the possibility of going without it. Richard Gaisford, Good Morning Britain.
Well, let's speak to Nithya Rajan, who's in Redditch. Nithya, you are with a family who are worried what impact these blackouts could have on their disabled son. I imagine it's very worrying for them.
Significantly worrying times for them, Kate. This family has 2 disabled sons and they need a lot of equipment just to keep life going at the moment here. They've got, for example, this monitor for their 21-year-old Geordie, who is partially deaf, blind and can't talk. So they need this to keep an eye and ear out for him at all times during night and day. But Keith, his father, can tell me a little bit more. Keith, we've got the equipment here that is life-saving for Geordie. How significantly will you all be impacted if these cuts go ahead?
Very significantly. I mean, Geordie has a very rare condition called charge syndrome, which means he's deaf, partially sighted, nil by mouth, and a lot of other medical conditions. And without the pump, because he literally is nil by mouth, without this pump, then he doesn't survive. So I'm now going to try and power it up as little as possible, because I'm trying to save money on electricity for the winter. But if they're going to say there might be power cuts, then I'm going to have to put it on charge 8-10 hours a day. And if the power cuts don't happen, then I'm spending more money than I have to. Apart from the pump, the monitor, he also has an electric bed, which has to be raised and lowered when he's not very well. We need significant lighting because of his poor eyesight. If there's power cuts, it's going to really, really upset him. He's not going to know what's actually going on. And so I'm going to look for another source of electric-powered lighting, which is going to have to be battery-powered. And I've no idea how much that's going to cost or where I'm going to find it. But I've got to do it, and then I might end up at the end of the winter with nothing happened. There hasn't been the 3-hour power cuts. I've been charging my pump for 8 hours a day all the way through the winter using electricity that I didn't need to and I can't afford to.
Keith, thank you for speaking to us. Obviously, very worrying time for the family here, alongside so many others around the country.
Nithya, thank you.
It's the knock-ons that those who are lucky enough to not have to deal with disability in their life wouldn't necessarily think of. But, of course, it's a reality. It's the everyday reality.
I mean, the picture you painted of you in the 70s, you kind of feel like that's quite exciting. It could be quite romantic.
Because I was little and it was, you know, my mum and dad made it lovely.
Yeah, and if you could do it in a way whereby it's all of you together and you could be together.
And you've got candles, maybe, you know, and things like that. If you're little and it suddenly becomes a cosy thing, but then, you know, all of our lives are so different now, aren't they? And we rely on different things. And if you're in the situation that family's in with any kind of disability, very challenging.